Northwest University, Vaal Campus. DC Motor Principle ETEE 222 Study Unit 5. This presentation will cover the basics, the commutator, construction of DC motors, applications of DC motors and reversing a DC motor. Left and right hand rule of electromagnetism. The right hand rule, illustrated at the left, simply shows how a current carrying wire generates a magnetic field. The thumb shows the direction of the current and the fingers curling shows the direction of the magnetic field. The left hand rule shows what happens when charged particles, such as electrons in a current, enter a magnetic field. You need to contort your hand in an unusual position sometimes for this rule, and it is illustrated below. The thumb indicates the direction of force, in other words, movement. The index finger points in the direction of the magnetic field, and the middle finger points in the direction of the current flow. The motor effect. Bending the conductor in a loop will have the current going in on the one side and going out on the other side. This will cause a continuous loop which aids the force of the magnetic field to push the armature in a certain direction. Current direction determines the force direction. If current flows from left to right in the conductor, then the force exerted on the conductor by the magnetic lines will push it to the top of the slide. If the current is reversed, the force will also be in the opposite direction. Why does this happen? You might be required to answer this question in the test. The coil goes through different phases of the cycle, creating a sine wave. At the starting point of the cycle, in other words 0 degrees, we have maximum output because it cuts the magnetic field at a right angle of 90 degrees. At 90 degrees, we have no conductors cutting through the magnetic field. Therefore, we have no output in volts, in other words 0 volts. At 180 degrees, the conductors are again at 90 degrees with reference to the magnetic field, but now moving in the opposite direction, which causes the voltage sine wave to go negative. Therefore, maximum negative voltage. At 270 degrees, we again have the conductors cutting through none of the magnetic field lines, therefore again giving a 0 output. When it returns to the start, in other words 360 degrees, we will have maximum output again in the positive direction because it is again also cutting through at 90 degree angles to the magnetic field. The construction of a DC motor. Normally, a DC motor makes use of stator field coils fixed on the inside of the stator. When the power is switched on, they become strong magnets. Balanced on two bearings is the rotor, which contains several loops of copper conductors connected to the commutator. The brushes then carries the current in both directions from the power source. The commutator with its brushes. In the second diagram, you can see that the brushes are held in place by brush holders, which keeps the brushes under spring pressure to keep the DC power supply in contact with the coil, in other words the armature. The commutator has breaks between the different sections to enable the current always to flow in the same direction. Applications of DC motors. They are very versatile and user-friendly, from driving conveyor belts to lifting equipment. Types of DC motors and their applications. The most common one is the DC shunt motor, which can be used for lathes, pumps and bandsaws. The DC series motor is another type which can be used for electric traction and high-speed tools. Then we get the DC compound motor, which can be used for rolling mills and driving loads that require large initial torque. Reversing the direction of motion. By changing the polarity of the supply, a normal double pole double throw switch, wired as in the diagram below, can easily change the direction of motion in the DC motor. This is the end of Study Unit 5 on DC motors. Make yourself fully aware of all aspects on this unit. The next study unit is on the theory of alternating current and will have your previous assessment on DC motors associated with it and will be assessed together.